Hey, what's up, investors? My name is Devin Moreno, and today we're going to be going through this house to talk about renovating it and what are the different variations of renovations I would do depending on whether I want to keep it or flip it. Also, depending on if I'm going to burr the property after holding it. Actually, as crazy as it sounds, flipping it often costs less money than if you were to actually keep it, but it kind of depends. It really depends on the house. That might sound a little weird, but that's because you can overlook certain things that you know might be a problem in the future. For all those who have never flipped a house before, you might think that sounds terrible, but it is actually extremely normal to need to ignore certain things, even though you know later on it might be a problem. Galvanized steel pipes might be an example of that, where if it's not leaking right now, just keep it and let it move. But if you're renovating it to hold the house, that's going to be your problem later on. So there's of course certain things though that where flipping will be more expensive than a buy and hold. And we're going to go through all of that in this video. I'm going to talk about what I would do on different types of budgets. My friend inherited this house, so he's thinking about a pretty light cosmetic. He initially said 15K. I'll tell you what you could do on 15K, and then we'll also go into the other variations. So let's first talk about this row home here. This is one where it has actually a pretty typical layout for here in Baltimore City. If we look around this living room here, we got a standard living room, nothing crazy about it. Mostly what I'm looking for are things like this thermostat here. So I already know, okay, it's at least on some sort of central system. That could be a boiler. One thing I'm noting here is that this ductwork here is telling me, all right, they at least have central heat. Not necessarily central air, all right, as far as AC, but central heat. So that's good. We don't actually have to run the ductwork ourselves. The problem is how they ran the ductwork. When a lot of people go into dining rooms like this and see this kitchen here, the first thing most people want to do is blow out this wall. Would I do that? It will kind of depends. Am I flipping it or am I burring it? If I'm doing either one of those two things, then I want to maximize the value that I'm going to be getting in this property, so the answer would be yes. However, if I'm trying to do a light renovation and just put a tenant in here, and I do not intend to pull my money out of the property, then I would actually say leave this wall alone. Why is that? Well, number one, this duct is most likely running all the way up into the next floor. They most likely are feeding a lot of the rooms, the bedrooms, with that duct vent. So once you run it up, you're going to have to reroute it and then even maybe figure out this other room. It kind of depends on what direction the joists are running. I'll explain how I can figure that out. But essentially, that's one problem. The other thing is a lot of these walls are kind of famously made of plaster, so it will kind of, you know, be a little bit of a messy thing when you try to just remove all these walls. You will have to automatically replace some of the flooring when you do this. They normally do the framing first, and then they put the flooring down later, which means that let's say you wanted to keep this flooring, let's say it was all vinyl and it was already flooring you like or tile. As soon as you wipe out this wall, now you have this line that's like suddenly in your flooring, and that can, you know, add to your renovation budget because now you're trying to like match it or do something with it. Instead, what a lot of investors will do, let's say you just want to keep this, so you want to keep it exactly the way it is with this doorway and whatnot. You don't want to have to rerun this duct. A lot of people will just cut maybe around here, make a post, and then you just carve into this. And if you want to, you can even put base cabinets down and make it like a bar or something like that. Just make this all kind of a big window. You want to watch out for like light switches. I don't see the one on this wall, but a lot of times they'll run wiring straight up and down this wall. So if he's trying to maximize the sort of value, that's what I would do. I would just cut kind of a big, huge square in here, and then you can put the countertop right on top. That's the most amount of money saved while still making it open concept. And then you can instead wipe it all out and put base cabinets in there. Kind of depends on what you want to do. I think either way it works. Base cabinets will probably cost you like $300 a cabinet, pretty much, for like a 30-inch cabinet. In this room, we're obviously going to talk about demo. You're seeing how this house is. There's a lot of stuff in here. To demo, pretty much can get all this stuff out. It might cost you about $3,000 to say. If you're going to start removing walls, it starts to escalate maybe to $4,000. You would often keep some of the lights or do something to just make sure your contractors have light in the house, but otherwise keep them until like a certain point and then swap them out if you want to. It just kind of depends on what you're swapping them with. Other than that, I wouldn't do too much to this. And you'll see this trim and figure out, do we have lead? That's going to impact us whether we're selling it or buying it. If we're selling it, we don't care about lead. But if we're holding it instead, then you do care about lead. That's going to be a constant cost to you over and over again. Here, these trims are some of the newer style trims, so I'm all right with that. For the purposes of lead, so far I'm not seeing a lot. Even when I walk into looking at some of these doorways, you're gonna notice a lot of doorways that I'm showing you here in the house, they're all pretty much this newer style trim. It seems to be all covered, so you might be surprised on how little lead you have. The only thing I'm seeing as far as lead is here in these baseboards. And in those baseboards, we're probably seeing maybe something that could be lead, but that's pretty much an easy fix. So let's go ahead into the kitchen real quick. Here in the kitchen, once again, we're gonna talk about what are we gonna do if we're holding this, what are we gonna do if we're flipping it. If we're just holding it and we're not cashing out, remember a burr strategy, you're trying to cash out, which means you want the appraiser to love the house. If you're not cashing out, I would actually try to keep these cabinets. These cabinets are in good shape. I wouldn't really do a lot with this, probably put new pools on them, don't do anything really much. Maybe at most you can change out the countertop with the sink and everything. You can just change that up for a new laminate. I would just keep it laminate. In this area, you're not really gonna see a lot of granite, so just go ahead and keep that. The dishwasher is the only thing I probably might get rid of. Instead of just throwing it away and getting a new dishwasher, I actually would redo the flooring and keep it going underneath the dishwasher. And then what I would do is not put a dishwasher in at all. The reason why is because a lot of appliance repair guys don't fix dishwashers because the insurance increases due to the tendency of dishwashers to flood all the time. And when it floods, of course, it's going to do a lot of damage. Tenants will often put like wads of spaghetti in there or a turkey or whatever, and these things break all the time. If it's not a higher end product, which the house is not, what I would actually do is just leave it open for a dishwasher, but then it can be advertised as a place that you put your trash can. The tenants will often use it as that if they don't want to buy a dishwasher themselves. If they do want to buy a dishwasher themselves, well then great, you're not responsible for it anymore. You don't have to worry about that cost. So I would actually not put a dishwasher there, get a new stove. You're seeing some of the trims. These trims are actually a little older. You might be replacing some of them. I mean, a lot of this trim is new. So you're looking at a pretty solid house. Also, we're seeing in here a couple of things that I've warned about. Here we see an outlet. I guarantee you this outlet actually goes completely up and down. So if you were to cut that big hole that I was talking about, you'd have to figure out something for this outlet. Also, watch out when you see like they're not grounded outlets or something like that, because as soon as you start messing with electrical anywhere in the house, oftentimes if you're pulling permits, they're gonna want you to fix everything all throughout the house. They're gonna want you to change and update all the electrical in the home. So just be careful about messing with it, especially if you're getting permits. Now, oftentimes on a project like this, you probably wouldn't pull permits for this job, even though yes, you're supposed to. Up to you on what you wanna do with that, but just note that if you do pull permits, they're probably gonna get you on like the whole house as soon as you start messing with that. The other thing is, it's kind of hard to see here, but you got another duct run here, which means that there could be 2 duct runs up there. Maybe punch holes in this and see what we're working with. There's another light switch over there. It might prevent us from opening it up. Now, if you're doing that cosmetic rehab, 15 grand budget, and you're not gonna pull your money out, don't even touch this wall. Nobody cares. They don't care that it's not open concept. You see it in HGTV all the time. That's if you're flipping it. That is if you are holding it, kind of depends on your budget, of course, on both of those. Oh, holding it with a burr intention that you're gonna refinance at the end of it. But otherwise, that is all I would do to this kitchen. Cabinet pulls, clean it up, new stove, take the dishwasher out, don't replace it. Hell, I'd even keep that fridge. To be honest, that fridge looks fine. The only issue I have with the fridge is the fact that it has a water dispenser, which means you will have to fix that if it breaks. But whatever, that's a minor cost to be able to not buy a $700 fridge brand new. Yeah, I mean, obviously you could get a used fridge if you want. I talk about this in another appliance video I have. I often recommend don't use used fridges. Everything else used, fine. Used fridges, the problem is if they break, which they will usually once a year, from my experience on average, now it's an emergency. I just buy a brand new, call it a day. So let's go ahead into the basement because that's gonna be a lot of our renovation work or maybe a lot of the gold mine of this house. Check it out. All right, so down here in the basement, I'm gonna really hold this house. I'm only really caring about a couple different things. Number one, the panel itself. What exactly is the panel supporting? Is it 100 amp, 150, whatnot? To be honest, most of the time in this kind of house, if I'm just gonna hold it and try to spend the minimal amounts of money, I'm not gonna care. A 100 amp panel generally will hold 2 devices that are 30 amps or more. That's oftentimes an electric water heater, an electric dryer, an AC unit. Most of the other ones are not gonna really apply. So as long as this house doesn't have AC, we don't intend to add it, which remember, we know there's ductwork in the house, but we don't know there's actually AC yet, we haven't actually checked the back, then we're probably fine with just a 100 amp panel. Otherwise, if you're gonna upgrade it, you might as well just redo all the electrical in the house. That, of course, is gonna cost you like $8 grand. We're gonna avoid doing that entirely, even if we're flipping it or even if we're burring it. It's just an expense we really don't need. I'd rather save $8 grand and just sell it without AC. If we're trying to do it without doing a burr, then you definitely don't wanna touch any of this paneling. I would clean it. I wouldn't even paint it. Keep the old historic look of the paneling, and that will save you a lot of money. All you have to do is wipe it down. We're actually going to notice here you have this asbestos tile flooring here. Just the name asbestos, so it's going to cause some alarm for a lot of people. Could it be a liability? Absolutely yes. I've seen it before where people actually keep the flooring in place. If you want to get rid of it, then what you want to do is wait for a rainy day. Make sure you aren't seeing any water issues on that rainy day. And honestly, it's going to sound crazy to some people out there in the United States. I actually would carpet this floor. The only reason why is because a 10 by 10 space, carpeting, you're probably looking at like 200 bucks. It's not going to cost you a lot. So for you to carpet this space, if it's not already having water issues or anything like that, then honestly, carpet can be really nice in a basement and it's really cheap. You cover up the tile, your liability is gone. If you're trying to do something a lot more permanent, then of course I always recommend luxury vinyl planks. With this drop ceiling here, I probably would actually just paint it. I wouldn't do really much with this drop ceiling if you're trying to do that $15,000 budget. If you're trying to go for the full look, then I actually still wouldn't do much with it. So that's a little bit deceptive, but right now these ceilings are actually not high enough to be a legal bedroom. You actually need 7 feet, and this is actually just below that. So the only reason I would ever actually close it is if I can push this up to the joists, all right, and put the drywall directly against it, and it would make 7 feet, and that would make it now a legal bedroom space. I would 100% do that if you're going like Section 8 or any program that cares. Market tenants don't care. This is a bedroom to them. If you're trying to refinance or flip, you do want to try to do that because now you're adding another bedroom, but remember that depends on your comps. For example, painting this would cost you, I don't know, 300 bucks, let's just say. If you had to put sheetrock up, all right, rip all this down, that adds to your demo cost, put sheetrock up, mud, sand, paint, finish, all of that stuff, well, that can well over add to the budget. So you have to make sure that if, like, let's say this is a 3-bedroom house, adding it to a 4th bedroom, it needs to do more than just, you know, simply add $15,000 in value. So it really depends on your comps on what you want to do here. The other restriction are any of the pipes or wiring below the joists. If they are, you probably just want to keep it like this and paint it. If they're not, then that does give you some options to push it up further. If you change any of those pipes and the electrical wiring, you're adding costs, and if you're doing permits, now you're changing way more than that, because as I mentioned earlier, you have to change everything if you touch any of the wiring really at all, especially if it's older. If it's all updated Romex wiring, you don't have to change the whole thing. We're gonna go into here and I'm gonna show you the washer and dryer. That's one thing I'm gonna be looking at. Is there a capability to add one if we already don't have one? Here it looks like we already have a washer. We already have a dryer behind me. So I'm not really gonna do anything with that. The only thing I might be tempted to do is maybe change out the sink, but to be honest, the whole area looks so rustic anyway and so kind of more old-fashioned. I'm okay with keeping this sink. We'll just leave it alone. Don't do anything with it. I probably wouldn't even do anything with it even if I was selling it. I'd probably, once again, clean up these walls. Let's talk about selling it. I might, for that purpose, paint the ceiling, but then lay vinyl maybe throughout and then stop there and make this kind of an appeal of the house. That old style wood that actually kind of looks cool. You can kind of keep it, maybe that old feeling of Baltimore. Because the rest of the house will be updated, if you want the newer modern look, well, you just go upstairs, no big deal. And we can see here up in these ceilings how they ran the wiring. The wiring is ran in such a way where they went through the joist. Great, that allows us to finish the space if we really want to. I don't see necessarily any pipes below the joist line. Easy finish if you want to go that route, and it looks like you will get your 7 feet. This is a slam dunk if your comps support doing that. We have the panel. A panel like this is definitely going to look like, it says actually it's 100, so 100 amps. You're not getting much more. Once you have this dryer, and if you have an electric stove, let's say for example, which the stove upstairs is gas, we don't have to worry about that, then realistically now we have the answer on can we add an AC unit. So let me go over them again. Stove, the water heater if it's electric, AC unit, and an electric stove. You can only have 2 of those 4 in a unit like this. The ductwork, I'm not gonna mess with it at all. I'm not gonna mess with anything to do with the furnace. We do see it's an 80% furnace. Why is that important? It's because of the chimney liner. When you have an 80% furnace, especially if the water heater is sharing that, you're oftentimes gonna have corrosion within the chimney liner and eventually you're gonna have to replace that. Depending on the shape of your chimney, that can cost you several $1,000s just to replace those chimney liners. In this house, if I'm holding it, I'm probably just gonna say it is what it is, and we'll wait for that to break down. If we are flipping it, same thing actually. But if we ever get to a point where we have to change out the unit, and we do have the option to put a higher percentage furnace, like a 95% furnace, Now we don't have to deal with that chimney liner anymore, especially if we switch the water heater over to electric, if it already isn't. Gonna leave this half bathroom alone. Many people might say, well, why would you make another bathroom? Not down here. Since it's already existing, we got the drains, change out the flooring here. We'll probably just do vinyl throughout this area. Or if you're not gonna do vinyl throughout this area, specifically tile just the bathroom, make it look nice. Now you have a second full bath. I would definitely try to get a second full bath if it already exists. If it doesn't exist, it just once again depends on those comps. I think there's far more value in these type of houses. Normally in this type of house, there's 4 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. There's far more value when you have 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms upstairs instead. So it would be 2.5 in this case. Since we have a full bathroom already, let's go ahead and look upstairs, see what we do with that. And that should be pretty much all I need to make my decision on what I want to do with this house. For this final part, now we're going to talk about the actual bed, bath layout upstairs. I've done a lot of houses like these. Pretty much we have 1 bathroom that is shared by essentially 3 different bedrooms. The problem with that is we actually don't have 4 bedrooms, we just have 3. Normally what people will do is they'll take the plumbing from that and carve into this bedroom a little bit, and then blow out the wall that essentially separates these 2 and turns it into a master or something of that nature. This room might be big enough to keep it as a primary bedroom, even despite you carving into it for a bathroom. You're gonna have to look at your layout, your design. I would think for this space, if you're trying to just rent it and spend the minimal amounts of money, you're not gonna refinance. I wouldn't go crazy if you're not refinancing. If you're not gonna refinance, then honestly, leave it as is. Just turn the downstairs basement into kind of a suite of a sort. Unfortunately, the parents will have to share with the kids on the bathroom front. It's honestly pretty typical. If you're trying to flip the house, this really depends on how much you acquired the house for and what your budget allows. Now, in most cases, you're not gonna have, you as a newer investor probably won't have bought the house cheap enough. In that case, do less. One thing you're gonna have to do is update that bathroom. It's gonna be very expensive. Going in here, it's really difficult to salvage a lot here. We have a lot of old tile. You could probably try to glaze things to get away with it, but as soon as you start ripping this tile out, you're gonna notice there's concrete and all kinds of other stuff behind that tile. It's all very old. You're gonna be ripping out a whole ton of stuff. This bathroom alone can dig into your budget like $5 grand if you start replacing everything. A lot of people will generally try to glaze it or just fix it up, makes it look nice essentially. Glazing it probably the #1 thing. That's it for a renter. For a flip, you're gonna have to make it look nice. You're gonna spend some money in here. The floors, we already have really nice hardwood floors. So you probably just want to go ahead and sand it. You maybe sand and stain or just stain it. Usually I sand it down if I'm noticing scratches and stuff in the floor already. A lot of this hardwood can easily make it another day. Other than that, your trims are good. Everything else is good. I'd say personally, this is probably a house I would do as minimal as possible to in order to just hold it and rent it out to a tenant. If you like more content like this, I'll go into more detail. Obviously, we didn't go into everything. I don't want to make this video too long. If you have any questions, comment below, let me know, and I'll talk about all your questions in other videos where I do more walkthroughs just like this one. Talk to you all really soon.